Fire. There are no fire alarm tests planned, so if a fire alarm goes off out of the building, turn left, follow the green signs, and congregate in the station fourth floor, right in the middle. You know how many is everybody signed in? And so I know how many of us there are in the building, and the fire alarm goes off, we will call when we get out, and then the fire brigade take over. Phones, can you please switch your mobile phones to silent or off if you need to take a call, because some people are on call. If you could take it outside, please, that would be appreciated. Toilets are out of this room to the left and are situated on the right hand side for the gents and the left hand side for the ladies. Right, if you haven't already done so, please let us have your details in the meeting attendance register, which is at the rear of the room. This allows us to keep a record of our attendance, of course, also thank those who are on Teams, and also if you put your email address on, allows us to keep in touch with you, should you wish to do so, and email you with all of the Institute's events. Tonight's meeting is a hybrid session, of course, face to face and online. We have a bunch of people online. The session will be recorded. So can you please, those online, mute your microphones and turn your cameras off. For those of you online teams, can you add your questions to the chat? And for those in the room, please leave the questions until the Q&A session at the end. Peterborough National Business, a couple of technical seminars planned for this year. One on the 5th of July, because actually tomorrow, which is working together to make traffic renewals affordable. If you want to go to that, I'm sure details of that will be posted on the Peterborough website afterwards. For those of us in Metro, or for that matter, in Maine is an interesting one for light rail, making city rail travel more sustainable. All the details of those two events are on the Peterborough site, as well as other technical seminars that are and of course you can join the lunch and learns at 12 o'clock usually on the Peterborough website. Section business, there's not very much different, but apologies from section secretary Sean Hill, who happens to be having fun in Florida somewhere, I think. So on to the presentation, and tonight we are going to hear from James Barlow, who is the Chief Civil Engineer for the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway.
Not the first and won't be the last.
As well as working for Network Rail as
Geotechnical Asset Engineer.
Geotechnical Asset Engineer. And tonight's presentation is themed New at Bridge 27, Heritage Civil Engineering Action. So I'm going to hand over to James now. Thank you very much.
So, and you're in the Teams meeting, can you just tell me that it's working? Right, lovely, lovely, right. Just, I've got that working and the mouse works. Yes, it does. Right, so thank you for coming. I've presented this a few times, so but not for quite a while now, so I'll try and remember everything. Questions at the end, which I think's already been said. I do answer an awful lot of questions as I'm going through. I tend to find as I've presented this. So there is quite a lot of information, and please tell me when I'm getting towards 45 minutes, because this has been known to last longer than that. 10 minutes to make sure I can cover everything. Right, so my name is James Barlow. A bit about myself. I'm a civil engineer by trade, not a pre-way engineer. I went to the University of Leeds, which is when I started volunteering at the Keighley and Worth Valley Railway, which is quite cheap and easily accessible by train from Leeds. And I started volunteering there in 2010. I then left university straight into the Network Rail graduate scheme, where I've been ever since, which is now 11.5 years. I've spent a lot of time in the in-house design team, drainage and geotech, and I'm now a geotechnical asset engineer covering principally East Coast route, but also North and East route out of York. In terms of the Worth Valley, as I said, I joined there in 2010 when I went to university, and just as a shovel wielding volunteer, and they paid for my beer for 4 years during uni on the proviso that I'd pay for a student's beer in the future, and I enjoyed it. And effectively, that then led to me being the railway's only civil engineer in 2019. So by default, I was appointed the railway chief civil engineer in November 2019, and that role has me responsible for all the infrastructure other than buildings, S&T and track. So boundaries, vegetation, drainage, earthwork structures, and every type of structure is my responsibility. I do have more than me to help. So for Keighley and Worth Valley Railway, not Keighley and Worth, I nearly said then, is located just to the west of Leeds on the way to the Yorkshire Dales. It's on the, we joined the national network at Keighley Station. So Keighley Station has 2 platforms, which are part of the Leeds suburban network, overhead electrified. And then we have platforms 3 and 4, which on a 99-year minimal lease that still says British Rail on it. And we then run up the Worth Valley to Haworth and Oxenhope. Haworth, you may know, has been famous as the home of the Bronze Sisters. In terms of the railway, it's just under 5 miles long, quite a lot of stations, a station every mile, a lot of infrastructure to manage. It was opened in 1867 by local wealthy mill owners and then closed in 1962 by British Rail, and this one was part of the Beeching Cuts. And then in June 1968, it was reopened by a local group of enthusiasts / locals who wanted to see the line survive. And although, because it's so a key part of the local area, a lot of our volunteers actually don't have any interest in railways. I do. That's why I ended up there. But a lot of our volunteers are just local people who like the railway and where it is, which is quite different to a lot of them. In terms of our department, we are 100% volunteer department. There is no members of the team that maintains infrastructure that's paid. Volunteers from a complete variety of backgrounds. There's a core group of us that have got industry experience that keep that professionalism and making sure the right competencies are there. But actually, the vast majority of the department have no construction or rail background. Ambulance drivers, lorry drivers, bus drivers, paramedics, IT business owners, a lot of students at the moment, and various other roles. We're called the Transatlantic Bridge Construction Company. I just mentioned that because it's our social media. And as I've said, that team, we maintain all the infrastructure, but I'm only accountable for the civil engineering. We have a track and S&T engineer who look after their respective areas. So the theme of the presentation is trying to show what we as volunteers achieved. But I feel like at the start, I should just point out all these people that did all the bits that we can't do. And so while I don't want people to think that we didn't have help or manage things professionally. So I'll list out the key ones. But the designers, Cass Haywood, who were a firm based in, can't remember, South Wales near Newport. Can't remember the name of the town. We had temporary works design from Pell Frischman. And the fact that the geotechnical director of the Wakefield Pell Frischman office lives in Oakworth had nothing to do with that whatsoever. Bridge fabrication and installation was Beaver Bridges. Piling was undertaken by Keller, and the large crane was Ainscough Crane Hire. We also had some local plant firms. We had Vextrix supporting us with CDM compliance as principal designer. And special mentions to the Environment Agency, who, including from myself, at times have had a bad rep over the years, but on this project couldn't have asked for a better partner to work with. I will brag that I put a lot of effort into forming a relationship with them and making sure they understood the project, but actually we didn't have any hold-ups from the 7 permit applications we had to do throughout the project to get stuff done, which is, I think, quite a good achievement. And Widing Weaving, they are an old mill next to the site that still make the beefeater costumes for the Queen and all the ceremonial stuff. It's a traditional mill. We used their car park and took over their business car park for 7 weeks at a 0 cost. So they deserve a special mention. It's not like work where we get held over a barrel to use land, and we just got whatever we wanted from Widing Weaving, which was, I'll show you their car park later as how key it is to the project. So in terms of the structure, so this is Bridge 27. This is a 1970s refurb picture, but is the clearest at showing the construction. So we've got 2 spans, got the siding span, which we didn't touch as part of this project. As you can imagine, it's not as maintained to the same level, being in a 5-mile-an-hour access line to a siding compared to the right-hand span, which is carries the main line and passenger trains. Also shows how heavy a skew it is. It's about a 45-degree skew, which makes all of it very, very complicated. It's on 2 masonry abutments and a pier, and those wrought iron trough girders with timber weir beams, with then some flying ends to try and square up the transition. Those of you of a more P-weir persuasion will know how much of trouble we've had maintaining the track geometry through there over the years and trying to maintain the weir beams. But in terms of driving the project, it was all knackered. The substructure, the wrought iron girders, the weir beams, it was all well past its best when we got to it. That's what it looked like in the months leading up to the project. So pretty much the same, other than some new walkways and handrails and looking a bit rustier. You can, out of interest, you can see the location, the piles roughly drawn out there with the orange marks. That's when that photo was taken. So it was identified for renewal in 2014 as part of our structures inspections back then. It was originally built in 1889 and it was second-hand girders at the time, I believe, off the main Aire Valley line that ran up towards the south to Carlisle. So they were second-hand when they were installed in 1889, and they started to suffer from significant section loss. The substructure was also in really, really poor condition. We didn't know what it was founded on. Trying to work it out was incredibly difficult. We wanted to really get rid of our last timber weir beam structure on the branch as well. I think we had 6 when we took it over from British Rail, and my predecessors had removed 5 of them. And so we were really keen to remove the last section. And not only that, as I'll show in a minute, this is a constraint on the river in the local area and leads to flooding of the lower Mill Hay area of Haworth, which is about 9 properties and 10 businesses. There is some dramatic photos online if you search Haworth flooding, but basically this one section of the river is the only section that's under capacity. So it then comes out the river here, and even though 20 metres downstream the river's got full capacity again, the water doesn't find its way in. What it does is come through our line and our yard. So that's it during a heavy storm. Widening Weaving car park on the left. That's it during a heavy storm, and that is our locomotive maintenance depot during a heavy storm behind us. And then where you can see the chimney in the distance, that bottom area of Haworth there then gets about a metre underwater. And so this is part of a long-term strategy to try and improve the river capacity in the area as well. So there was a number of reasons to try and renew it differently to how it was, including trying to remove that central pier. So because of that flooding incident, we then turned the project after identifying in 2014 into what it became from a like to like. We then had a more urgent bridge renewal, which I got handed to me a month after I took over as civil engineer. And then COVID obviously had quite a large impact on our operations during that early 2020s, which delayed things. Options report in 2021, and that's when we really started to get involved in the design development. And at that point, I knew how key the discussion with the Environment Agency. So before we'd even selected an option, I got the Environment Agency to site and explained what we were doing. The key there was getting them to site, because when I tried to explain to them that we couldn't lower the soffit, we couldn't increase the soffit of the bridge, because the structure gauge on the local structures was already at limit and we couldn't raise the track. The local flood officer looked at, not looked at me, but replied with a very blank sort of, I don't understand what that means. No, you have to raise the soffit of the bridge. But when you get them to site, you can go, is that train going to fit under that bridge? And quite helpfully, when I got them to site, a train came past and you can see how tight we were, which I will just briefly sort of go back. So the bridge that I'm stood on there to take that photo, we're tight to structure gauge on that already. So we've got very limited, and I think you can see in the photo, we're about a 1 in 55 gradient as well. So in terms of your vertical alignment, very limited options to do anything. And then 2022, we started the design development at the end of the year, and in middle of 2023, we then established what the project budget was. Initially, it was 750,000. The quote for the steel deck between the options report in December 2021 and March 2023, the quote for the steel deck went from 220 to 690,000 pounds for fabrication and delivery. So that became quite an expensive project. 1.25 million. The most expensive project the railway had ever undertaken before that was £155,000. So in terms of scale for the organisation, it was huge, and yeah, held quite a lot of pressure. And so, and once we realised we were quite getting towards that scale, we assembled a Worth Valley project team who, I think it's worth pointing out, that project team was formed about 20 volunteers, and we met every 2 weeks for 3 hours on a Tuesday evening for 2.5 years, and then all the activities on site. So it was quite a large volunteer team who put a lot of time into this project. I've already sort of skipped to the Environment Agency, getting them on board with the project. They basically, we should have had to raise the soffit of the bridge by 400 mil. They allowed us to keep it as it was. We couldn't lower it, but we had to keep it as it was, which was an achievement. We were quite pleased that they did that. That allowed us to lengthen the span. There's also, for some reason, the Worth Valley, when they built the sewers, they built them in the bottom of the river. Not particularly helpful. But there's a sewer about there, running the bottom left of that photo. You can't do driven piles within 10 metres of a Yorkshire Water sewer. Rotaries within 3, so we had to do Yorkshire Water permit applications because of the piling and excavation work we were doing there. We also had to engage very, very early rain stuff. Other than the Environment Agency, Ainscuff were the first company I contacted. While we were developing in 2023, we got wind that a contractor had been refused, a crane hire contractor, sorry, had been refused access into Haworth for a crane that was a 50-ton crane. Our calcs showed that we needed a 500-ton crane to lift this in. And so we straight away went to Ainscuff and went, well, what do we do here? They had a good relationship with the council, and the point below also helps, which is us through the council successfully managed to apply for a £1 million community ownership fund grant to fund the bridge. So the Worth Valley could afford to replace this bridge, but would have had to defer lots of other things. So this £1 million grant effectively allowed us to carry on with our locomotive overhauls and other areas of restoration, such as Keighley Station, which had just recently been completed. But that was administered by the council, so they had a little bit of a political will to make it work. And I believe the highways team were asked if they were to say no to demonstrate why, which made more detailed assessment of bridges be undertaken. And we managed to play over a few bridges and get the crane in, with bridge inspectors on site examining the first load over. And if the ballast of the crane had gone over the bridge and they wouldn't like what they've seen, that would have been it. The ballast would have been stuck and the crane wouldn't have been allowed in. We were comfortable by that point that it was all right, but that's the level that the highways went to support us in getting the crane to get the crane in. And at that point, we started working on constructability and removing assumptions. And that was working with Beaver Bridges, who by this point we were starting to engage informally on sort of early contractor involvement, as they were at that point a preferred supplier. Just a little bit about subterranean obstructions, which apologies for the really poorly drawn. There is no diagrams, which is why this was an issue. So that black line on the left with the blue is the water, the river. The black is our abutment. There was a culvert that came out of that abutment, and you can see the grey assumed route. That's where it was mapped on our records, on the Yorkshire Water surface water drainage records, and on the line plans from the original construction of the line. Where the culvert actually went when we dug it out was that orange circular route, basically following the piles, which I still remember the day I was in Slovakia when the team dug that out. We realised there was a problem. We realised it wasn't quite as the drawings were telling us. And we said, right, we're going to have to just take the track off and dig, and we're going to have to find it. And they sent me a picture of it, and I still remember the bar I was in Bratislava when I looked at it and just went, how? When all 3 different independent sources said that the grey was the assumed route. We also found at that point, which is lost information rather than it being poor records, that there were some cottages next to the railway that had been demolished for the railway, and the cellar floors were in the way of that. And because we were rotary piling, any of these would have stopped the rotary piling from being done. So yes, interesting. I like the diagram because it follows the piles so beautifully. So detailed design, Cass, who for me and a lot of others, they're definitely one of the leaders in direct fastening. So while we'd managed to get rid of the timber-way beams, we couldn't get rid of it being direct fastening. We just didn't have the headroom to put a ballasted track in there. It will remain our only direct fastening structure on the railway. And as I said, Vextrid supported us with CDM compliance as principal designer. So the final design ended up consisting of a 23-metre span. So that's 23-metre on the skew from the furthest ends. If you treat it as a true skew, 17 metres. It's sat on 2 pile caps at each side, which you can see on the 3D drawing at the top. And then you've got a short triangle section on the top of that pile cap to flatten off the transition from the solid track onto the baluster track with transition slabs sat in the pocket there as well. It was 6 piles, 0.6 diameter, 16 metre deep. The pile number changed numerous times through design. The ground investigation information was 6 years old by the time we got to it on this project and was undertaken by my predecessor. And due to a self-confessed oversight on my part and the designer's part, we didn't spot on one of the boreholes in italics with an asterisk next to it that they'd hit artesian water at 20 metres, which for those who aren't aware what that is, effectively when they got through all the clay, so this part of West Yorkshire is what I would describe in the technical terms, really bad clay. And when they got through that down into the bedrock, there was enough pressure in the water in that bedrock that the water came 3 metres out of the ground. If you pile into that, that's game over. It's just going to wash everything away. So we kept having to increase the number of piles to get down to a toe level where we were 100% or 99.9 recurring percent that we were never going to reach that strata. So they hit it at about 22 metres and we went for 16 metre piles. So that was 6 piles. That was also to get the smaller rig into site, as we needed a restricted access rig, and that we felt that was probably the limit of what that rig could do. That was after discussion with Keller. So in terms of the design, in terms of cross section, track is directly fastened to the steel deck via Pandrol Viper base plates, which I know nothing about until I used them on this project as a geotechnical engineer. But effectively what you've got is a seating plate on the deck as well. So the Viper plates are attached to a seating plate, which means at no point to undertake maintenance those plates do we need to get under the bridge for any bolting. That was quite a key change that we made about partway through when we realised we had 25mm to play with, and so we used that 25mm to get those plates on there. As I said, the steel deck's still very skewed with the concrete pile cap squared to that track alignment. The pile caps are completely separate from the existing masonry abutments on the bridge. So the pier gets removed, but the abutments are kept as river training walls effectively, and we've got a concrete fill between the pile cap and the abutment wall. It's probably worth mentioning one of the things we also did in the planning is, although we don't need planning permission, it's in a conservation area, so we need something called prior approval from the council, which is we have to demonstrate that we are doing everything we can to maintain the character of the area and we're not doing anything adverse. So maximising the amount of masonry that was still on view and hiding the concrete with that was one of them. Painting it grey, you'll see the final colour is grey. That's the same colour as all the other metallic bridges on our railway painted, and the existing handrails are white, which is why our handrails are white. But basically, those were the 3 things we did to placate the council. There was no reason not to. It didn't affect us particularly. And then again, the central pier was demolished, but only beneath the mainline span and not the siding span. And then there's some just pictures of the detailed design. So you can see Viper base plates. For anyone who's got experience using base plates like that, every single base plate needed an individual amount of shims when we installed it. That was a fun Tuesday. That's just some more detail on the end. So you can see that you've got the 6 piles were not loaded evenly. You've got the 2 piles directly under the bearings on the skew there, taking most of the load, and then some additional piles just to take the rest of the load. And then there's your elevation view as well. So you can see on the bottom section, you can see with the gradient in the concrete it was quite challenging for setting out and the reinforcement, and that's why the Worth Valley didn't do that with our little cement mixer, and we left that to Beaver Bridges to do through their subcontractor, who I can't remember now, but they are Middlesbrough based. So having gone sort of through the planning, we just sort of jump back a little bit. That's the photo that I received while I was in Slovakia of the route of the culvert. They uncovered it, and we also believed it was dry and no one had seen it running for 50 years. Well, when you take the lid off it and take the silt out, it starts running again. So at that point, instead of the Environment Agency saying you can just remove the route and abandon it, it became a culvert diversion job. And that, in the centre there, is the capping on the borehole that shot 3 metres up into the air as well. So this was November 2023. So this was the first of our Sunday evenings volunteering turning up to take the track off. I was working during the week and then turning up on Friday to put the track back. That was the first of about 6 of those possessions that we did that in. In 2024, in February, we then did diversion of services. So we've got overhead telecommunication services still, like the old school telegraph lines. We also do have some buried stuff. Every service we had was in the way of this job. So we went 100 metres north of the site, south of the site, got them all into a single duct, took them away from all the work around, which was quite a lot of work in itself. And at this point, we're starting to go into contract with Keller and Beaver Bridges as well. And then piling platforms designed by Pell Frischman, widening weaving car park again, showing its worth with the access gate into the site. So Pell Frischman designed some piling platforms for us. We worked with them to really get that to a level that the Worth Valley could build ourselves. So we installed the piling platforms ourselves with locally sourced stone. So the stone, if Wyding Mill wasn't there, you'd be able to see the quarry that the stone came from. We could hear the lorry leaving the quarry with the stone when it was coming down. We had to get it tested. We spent a little bit of money getting it tested because it was a quarry that didn't do its own certification. So we needed 6F5. They wouldn't certify their own. So we actually went and collected some, took it to Leeds and certified it as acceptable and used that. That was a lot cheaper than going to a further away quarry. And always good to use local. We do as a railway try to put money into local businesses as much as we can, and we do a lot. All the plant hire was from a local farming plant hire company that's just up the other side of the valley. So in that picture there, you can see on the south side of the bridge in the far, you can see diversion of the drainage. So instead of it crawling in the line, we took it and we hugged that wall as close as we could get the trench boxes to let us. There was 2 mil between the new pipe and the pile cap when it was installed. So we used all the room that we could possibly use. This was another Friday track off. So, Sunday night after the steam trains finished running, track off, coming back Friday to put it back on. We also start to learn just how congested the site is. It's amazing how big a site looks before you start digging any holes. We also started monitoring the structure. So on the basis that the substructure was already deemed to not really be where we wanted it to be. And you can see how involved that excavation is. You can see how involved around the flying ends and the way beam ends we are as well. From this point, there was a 10-mile-an-hour speed restriction over the bridge that stayed for the rest of the project. And there was live tilt meter monitoring on all the stonework and target monitoring 4 times a week on all the surrounding area from this point on. As we were a bit worried about the wall on the right, we were worried about zone infrastructure, and we were worried about the track as well. Nothing moved in the end, but it was worth doing that. And then piling. I think this is one of my favourite photos showing how difficult the site was to manage. One way of keeping our costs down, obviously, is to not bring in rail contractors because they are more expensive than high street contractors. There's no getting away from that. And so a key part was extensive briefings and our supervision of site. So we did all of that. What you can see there is Keller piling on the north side. And then you can see us using our train to bring in stone to do the piling platform on the other side. And again, widening weaving car park, full of plant, full of equipment, no cost. And again, you can see the existing bridges left in place while we're doing all these phases. I haven't touched on that. It would be much more efficient and it'd probably cost a little bit less for us to just go, we're going to do this in 6 weeks and do the whole thing. The main thing stopping us doing that is actually volunteers, because my work aren't going to let me have 6 continuous weeks. I mean, I'm off for 3 months for shared parental leave at the moment, but for this, I can't just take 6 weeks off work. I don't have enough leave is the first thing. And we can't resource that as volunteers at all. So actually the staging of the project is just the only way we could deliver it. So that's why that bridge is stayed in, and that's why it's covered in monitoring. I'd have much rather just removed that bridge and just got cracking. I think one of the other things to say is getting the piling done actually took a bit of a risk away from the blockade as well. Getting out the ground is one of the riskier parts of the civil engineering project, and we got that done and dusted, and could then focus on just planning the bridge itself. The supervisor for Keller said that our site management was more professional than lots of the sites he's worked on, and I won't name who he named there. He also said it was the best and most solid platform he'd ever drilled on. I suspect I know the reason for that, which is because we followed every letter of the temporary works design to the letter, because we don't know what piling platform is supposed to look like. Whereas I imagine not everybody does that, but we certainly compacted it. It was 100mm layers, 16 passes over each section with a roller, and we watched and we counted and we did the 16 passes on every section with a roller. It's just some aerial shots again showing just how close to the existing structure and how tight that is. That piling rig couldn't be any larger than that, because it fitted on the siding span to get it to the other side of the bridge. There is no access to the railway there is no access for non-rail plant anywhere on the other side of the bridge. So any non-rail plant had to go in over that structure. So that was the largest piling rig we could get. So bridge fabricator, Beaver Bridges, they've got a facility in Wigan. So they're, I think, Shrewsbury based, but they've got their facility in Wigan. So it's nice, just along the M62. There was lots of challenges around the fabrication. They had their challenges, particularly around the quality of the steel initially, and also the direct fastening nature. So while they've done rail bridges, they've not done a direct fastening rail bridge, and understanding that to the mill tolerance, as my track engineer regularly told me, well, they learned some lessons, and as did we. I do remember an entertaining conversation with them when they asked to delay the possession for 3 months, which would have put the possession on the due date of my wife's first child, and I explained that to them. And at that point, they started working weekends and evening shifts. And to credit to them, we offered to cover 50% of their extra staffing costs to speed it up, and they rejected us on that and didn't do it. So fair play to them on that, and they did deliver it in time. What it did lead to is we didn't have enough time to adjust the track design. So to getting the track right over the bridge at the end, it was a last minute thing, and it wasn't as quick as we'd have liked. And the Viper base plates have very long lead times on the shims, like 6-week lead times on shims, which we found quite interesting. At 20 grand a unit, not 20 grand a unit, 20 grand for all of them, I think. Can't remember actually. It was a lot more than I thought it'd be. So by the time we'd actually worked through the program, we worked out the Beaver Bridges really needed to be on site on day 1. Originally, we were planning for them to be on site on day 3, but to get it done in the 19 days we had, we needed them on site on day 1. So we undertook demolition on Sunday night in one hit. We demolished everything we could in advance of the possession. So all the walkways were removed, and any bits of the pier that didn't support any structure were removed as well. And we managed to do that in evenings in the summer. So throughout July and August, we were running 2 engineering gangs a week on an evening, like 5 till 9, including delivering materials. I include that train only because we think it's the heaviest train that's ever run on the Worth Valley for anyone of note. We think it was, I can't remember the tonnage now, it's far too long, but we think it was the heaviest train we've ever run on the Worth Valley. We finalised all the payments and paperwork, and as I said, we ran the engineering trains 2 evenings a week. One thing I do love about volunteering at the Worth Valley compared to work is that it takes me about 5 minutes to take possession. It's that simple. And it's not simple as in unsafe or cutting corners, let's just be clear, but just the simplicity of our operation means that he's ready there with the impact wrench, because in 5 minutes time he was undoing fish plates. It's a bonus, but it also allows us to do as much work as we can in evenings, which we take a lot of advantage of. So this is then us into the main blockade in September. We started after the last train on Sunday, the 1st September. Time to take possession around 5 minutes, which I've said. We utilised 2 steam cranes to remove the track and the girders. I like using these cranes. They are really, really nice. What you don't realise about a steam crane is they're silent. You can talk to the driver. They don't make any noise at all, which, having worked with diesel cranes, is fantastic. It makes it safer, and they're also just quite cool, I'm afraid. They really are. So that is a 50-ton crane from the 1930s that used to be based in Willesden Depot in London, that's been restored by Bahamas Loco Society, and that's it, taking the main girders out. It managed to get that done in about 30 minutes, and once we'd done that, they were put to one side to be moved by a smaller crane up the line. When I say they're really good, they are quite slow. But other than that, they're good. The abutment and pier demolition then got started. The pier we did over the week, but the abutments we got started on, and as you can see, the track's already out by the time we do that. And the pile caps, this is where Beaver Bridges came in with their JNP subcontractor, possibly. You can, even from that image, you can see just how intricate that pile cap is and how tight the hole is to get it all in. And that's the pump. We went for, bear in mind our total contract with Beavers was in the order of 500, 600k for all of what they delivered us. For an extra £2,500, we could go for rapid curing concrete, which gave us a 2-day contingency within their programme. We used about a day and 23 hours of that contingency, so it was £2,500 really, really well spent. I've never seen concrete cure that quickly. So we used some of their spare concrete from the deliveries to cap off the end of the pier under the other span of the bridge. And we went to write our initials in it after 20 minutes, and nothing. I've never seen anything like that. And the heat coming off it, when you walked on it in the next morning, it was something I've never particularly experienced. I use bridges very often there. Being able to strike the formwork effectively the next morning, which allowed really quite rapid progress to be made, because they had to do it in 4 pours overall. We kept this siding line operational throughout to help with moving materials. Managing those excavations became quite difficult, and we stopped that partway through the works. Just one of the challenges and things we didn't expect and maybe didn't foresee as well as we should have done. The other thing, as well as getting the crane in, getting the bridge in, was quite complicated. It came in one section without its walkways. That's how tight it was getting into the Wydene Weaving car park. So we then installed the walkways, the handrails, the pandrel seating plates, and the trimmer beams, and touched up the paintwork, all in the Wydene Weaving car park. It was just big enough to have the crane have the bridge sat in there and work around. Nighttime delivery of the bridge deck under a 6-car police escort with localised road closures. What I discovered during this is that Google Maps is quite accurate. If you turn the traffic on, you could see the junctions going dark red in Bradford, so I could follow it, and it was about 30 seconds behind. So Google Maps live traffic, actually really good, it turns out. This road here, so this road that you can see here, that goes through to the left to a housing estate with 350 houses on. It was the only route in and out of that housing estate. We had to shut it for an hour and a half to get the bridge in on that evening. Lots of community engagement. We did really well. We did letter drops. We got into the estate Facebook group. We had Worth Valley volunteers that live in the estate updating the Facebook group. We had one complaint in the entire job. Bear in mind, we blocked the road off 3 times for at least an hour. And they came the next morning with biscuits to apologise. So in terms of community engagement, we took that as a bit of a win. They were really understanding. They were all out watching all the phases of the work. And that's it, doing a 16-point turn on the mini roundabout. So it's come forwards down the road to the left, come in, and then it eventually got itself to reverse towards the camera. This was 11:30 at night. And then you can see how much room it takes up in the Wydene Weaving car park there as well. So in terms of the main lift, good crane picture. Always like a good crane picture. This was the bit that required most of the planning, and it only took 10 minutes. Special dispensations from the Highways Department, which I've talked about. The council were really good to work with on this. And what do they call it? Abnormal load officer for West Yorkshire. If anyone knows, West Yorkshire particularly strict on their abnormal loads. Police escort all times, which is unusual. North Yorkshire, for example, is not like that. 50-ton deck by the time it got lifted in with a 450-ton capacity crane. It was not at its limit, obviously with the conservative element of it. That was at its limit for what it could lift. You'll also notice just how accessible the site was for people to watch. I remember my brief that morning reminding people that they will be on YouTube that day. Just to preempt a question, the bridge is installed at that point and the people on the right have been allowed back there, and they weren't there during the lift. But we had about 250 to 300 people from the local community, and my parents came as well, which was quite nice, to come and watch, as they don't really know what I do at the Worth Valley, so it was quite nice for them to come and go, oh, you're actually doing real stuff, you don't just play with trains. But that was a good day, and the sun also shine on all day. And then we go on to the track reinstatement. I'm not the track engineer. I don't know a lot about what the track put in, but it was bullhead, and it is now 113-pound flat bottom, and we are in the process of welding it up. There was the vertical alignment because of the way the new bridge was longer, so the horizontal alignment had to change because it was straighter for longer. And the vertical alignment changed because the bridge is on a slightly different gradient to be able to get the track under the adjacent overbridge. And so there's been a follow-up track renewal to finish the job, not next year. I didn't update that bit 2 months ago. So it's actually formed part of a wider track renewal, and hopefully by the summer that will be our first section of CWR on the Worth Valley, which is it's going to be about just over a quarter of a mile, maybe a bit longer. Where's my mile post? It's over a quarter of a mile, including over the bridge. It'll be the first section of stressed up CWR. Breather switches have been installed at the south end as part of this job, and we undertook about 100 metres of track renewal to the south of the bridge. Lovely, we're about there, we're good. And then we finished that off this year, just not done the welding and the stressing yet. That's the other steam crane, so that's only a 10-ton steam crane. That's from the 30s as well. Very good P-weight crane. And then the first train we ran on morning of Friday the 19th with ballast, which is that train there. Not to be underestimated, having done like over the summer all those possessions and sites, how much mess we had made. And so all the helpful volunteers that weren't up to track packing on the last day, we removed all the site fencing, site signage, the site cabins, cleaned the car park, because in 3 weeks of mixing concrete in the car park, we had made quite the mess of the car park. Cleared half a mile of railway, and then at 8 o'clock on Friday 19th, we handed the possession back. We managed to hand it back without TSR as well, which we are only a 25-mile-an-hour railway, so it's not that much of an achievement, but it is still quite pleasing to always hand back without a TSR. I'm going to skip, and I'm going to go back to that. I think it's right to talk about the challenges. I will wax lyrical about how amazing this project went and how good the project manager who led it was. But actually, we did get quite a few things wrong, and there were quite a few pitfalls that we went into. Volunteers are the best and worst people in the entire world. They are great for being keen and turning up, but they also have opinions. And we had a lot of arguments internally, like, how dare you close the car park that I park in to maintain my steam engine for a day because you need to host 5 HGVs and 2 cranes? I want to park there. Well, can you not go and park across the road? Well, that's £1.10 for the day. You're like, right, okay, go away. Having that, it's good that people are passionate, but sometimes it can create clashes. Really tight access, and also stopping them wandering to the site to have a look. That was the other really big. We had 2 layers of Harris fencing blocking areas of the railway to not for public, for his own volunteers. Really tight access within the site and access, including the wider local road network. we identified that early enough in terms of the wider local road network, and we worked with all those stakeholders to get that sorted. But in terms of the access on site, I don't think we appreciate how tight the site was, and there was a lot of replanning and updating plans and risk assessments on the job as we did that, and that's certainly something we've taken from this job going forward. The restricted nature of the site, we've got the river flooding, the adjacent overbridge, the yard, and the Yorkshire Water Sewer, all in that site. I think Cass Hayward described it in the end as we basically gave them about a 15 mil band to get the rail level, and that was it. There wasn't any lateral horizontal band. We said it has to be there. There isn't another option. We couldn't get another horizontal alignment to work, and we gave them a very narrow band and said we need a bridge that fits that. That was a challenge, and probably was one of the reasons it was so expensive as a project. Expensive relatively. Environment agency restrictions on the timing of the project were another challenge. Again, they generally want you to work in rivers between May and September. When does a tourist attraction earn as much of its money as it can in a rural part of the UK? May to September. Timing it around that was quite difficult. The grant funding required the completion of the project in September 2024. So there was definitely a point in about January 2024 where if that stipulation wasn't there, I would have delayed the project. I would have piled in September 2024 and come back in September 2025 to install that. And in April, when I found out my wife was pregnant and due in November, I definitely thought that. But that didn't really give us a chance. It didn't lead to any pressure to do things unsafely. It wasn't that sort of pressure. But in terms of our resources as a volunteer civil maintenance department, we were all goosed at the end of this project. We had all worked our own jobs full time alongside this, and so just put that on there. I've talked about the housing estate and the general community. KWR runs every weekend of the year. A lot of heritage railways like ourselves shut down for a large part of the winter, and you get good engineering access. I don't. They run every weekend of the year. And really pleasingly, the civil maintenance department now is mostly under 40. The bad part about that is they work Monday to Friday, so therefore we have to try and do is work at weekends. And the lack of accurate records. So just going back to finish then, what did Worth Valley Volunteers do on the project? All the project management, project engineering, and we acted as principal contractor. So under CDM, very unusually, we acted as the client and the principal contractor. There's two reasons for that. One is, for us to be able to do the bits that we can do ourselves, we can't client it to a principal contractor and then subcontract it back to volunteers. That is a contractual mess. So we keep the principal contractor to be able to do as much as we can. That is because we have enough of us that are out in the industry that can support that. The other thing is, in terms of managing risk and cost, we can't afford to contract out the big risks. We just can't afford to do it. So we have to manage those risks ourselves. We have an appointed person who's done craning all his life and did all the associated lift planning other than the contract lift through Ainscuff. But obviously still a lot of involvement in that as the principal contractor. We coordinated all the projects and site activities, and we managed the site. Our engineers had the final approval on all works, even the stuff from Beaver Bridges. We signed off all that and inspected it. All the temporary works was done by us, including the piling platforms, all the site cabins, fencing. The fencing changed daily, depending on what we were doing in the Wydene car park as well, which it's not that much, but it's just something else. We did all the track design, removal and reinstatement because we have the right volunteers to be able to do that. All the operational planning, possession management, as well as running all the engineering trains we did ourselves, all the community liaison work, all the demolition work, and we drunk an awful lot of tea. And I think that's about 45 minutes. So thank you.
Thank you very much, James.
My voice is very dry now.
Apologies that I'm not looking for a drink. There will be something next day, rest assured. So go back to the floor for any questions.
No.
You talked about increasing the river capacity, but actually the upstream central pier under the
that bridge will require renewal within 15, 20 years. So if we didn't do this now, we were fixing ourselves into having that central pier for the rest of time, effectively. So the decision was made to remove it on the basis that that structure is going to need renewal within the next 15 to 20 years. I'd like it to last longer than me, so I don't have to do it. But I'm not confident in that. So yeah, it's a long term.
Right.
It's a long term thing. It has already improved the capacity because the worst part was the downstream end because of other factors in the river.
Is there hydraulic modelling?
No, the Environment Agency did some, and it adds a benefit that was worth them supporting. I can't remember the numbers. There's a flood alleviation scheme going on as well, because it only floods about 9 residential properties, it attracts minimal funding. And also their first option was to just block the railway whenever there's a flood alert. Well, that's great, except if you do that on some days in December, you'll lose 10% of our yearly income on a Saturday. So there's some hydraulic modelling, and it's a long term thing. So yeah.
That siding bridge did have some work done on it, didn't it?
It was renewed with second-hand girders in 1977.
No, just handrails and that did
On
recently siding bridge.
yeah. The handrails and a new GRP walkway because the flooding always wipes out the timber walkway. So I've put a GRP grate on it. What was the other part of your question? Or was it just that?
That was it.
Oh, right, okay.
How did you manage the competency around the years? Because obviously everybody can be keen.
So
Somebody needs to make sure
Yeah.
that you actually do what you know what you do.
So we have an engineering competency assessment for our engineers, which is based on the UK spec, and we are in a fortunate position where we have enough engineers that we could set that up. We had enough fellows and chartered engineers that we had people who could assess that. So, for example, civil engineering, there's an interview with a fellow of the IMechE and a chartered civil engineer who does that interview and passes you off as competent to act as an engineer, and the same for other disciplines. So that's how we manage engineering. The site foreman competence is our competence for managing work sites, which we run training courses, and it's a select group to maintain the experience as well, because as you can imagine, it not being paid role, you don't do it as often. So we have quite a small group. So yeah, engineer. We do it internally. So engineering is not, we don't train internally because all we're doing is assessing. You have to be an engineer in the industry to be an engineer on the Worth Valley. Basically, we're just doing a check effectively. But site foreman, we do that training internally to our rule book, because it's our rule book's different to Network Rail. So if you for example, if you were at COS or site manager, etc., we have some different things. So even then, we have to convert you almost, because it's still a version of the 1960s rule book with increments.
Yeah, think about this. So I've been over it, very good. The Worth Valley lots of times, but I've also been through at home and also understand, how properties getting through. So you've got the sewer running, I presume, on the north side of the the river.
Yeah.
Whose responsibility is that?
Yorkshire Water.
Well, have they thought about deepening it so it can deepen the channel? Oh.
I don't think Yorkshire Water have thought about anything regarding that. We sent an application to Yorkshire Water to ask for information on exactly where the sewer was so that we could plan our piles, and they said, here's the forms for connecting a new foul sewer. So it was quite like getting blood from a stone, really. No, I don't know whether there's a good image of it actually.
Probably straight through.
See that sewer in the river on the left? That stands up to bank height, and that's just in the middle of the river. Obviously Yorkshire Water didn't build this sewer. This sewer predates every organisation that currently has any involvement in it. But yeah, it's not great. It would, to be fair though, removing the sewer, you'd also need to renew our other bridge to do that, and we'd need to do quite a lot of work to deepen the channel, because the footings of that siding span we think are only about 2 foot below bed level. they're not deep footings at all.
The river floods again, it's gonna come straight through your workshops again.
Yeah, we'll do. It'll continue to do that. I've told the railway that we cannot reasonably stop it. So I've said what we need to do is be resilient. So what I've done is I've done a lot of work in compartmentalizing the yard and saying these are the sections that we can allow to flood. In the winter, keep them clear of stuff that you wouldn't want to be damaged. And we've got ways of protecting key areas of the workshops and stuff. And I think there's a new building going to be put in the next few years for all our machining, like big lathes and all them other things that I wouldn't understand as a mud engineer. But that'll be built in with flood protection from ADOT and stuff like that. So yeah, I basically said you need to accept it's going to flood, and we just protect key areas now. It's just too much water. It's...
Thank you.
Any more?
Rating.
All right.
It's a rating, capacity rating you've got around your system, and is that how you have you this bridge or?
Yes. So if I didn't renew this in September 2024, there'd have been an 18-ton axle load. So we don't work in RA ratings yet. We're in the process of transferring to it. We just work on axle loads. We work on the branch has a limit of 20 tons, and over that it needs a special dispensation. That has changed recently. I'm not going to go into all of it, but I was going to put an 18-ton limit on if this wasn't renewed within 2024. We were that worried about it. We were already delivering this way later than we wanted to, and we're really, starting to get a bit twitchy. This is RA10 now, so this is for anything that we need to run. This is absolutely fine. That is now our policy. All bridge renewals or underbridge works at RA10, because I think I've got a refurb on a bridge round the corner, and I've got a strengthening scheme in Keighley. And once I've done them, I can up the whole branch to RA10. So I've been working progressively, ticking off bridges.
So 25 tons.
Yes, ish. Yeah.
What British Rail ran this route as?
A lot. Yeah, a lot. I don't know what I wouldn't know what they ran it as it strictly. I think their limit was 19 tons max, and the sort of traffic that this line got wouldn't have got near that. I don't think it was very lightly used. What comes for us is hosting things like Flying Scotsman and stuff like that, which obviously a normal operation engine like that had never found its way up a little mill branch line in West Yorkshire, but it's a license to print money, so it comes to us occasionally.
When did the big crane come?
Art said more services on the M62, up the M606 into Bradford, and then along a load of roads in Bradford that I don't know the name of, but it took the main route via Queensbury and Denham. So it came over the tops. It's the only route that crane could get in. Same as the bridge. Didn't come up from Keighley, no, because Ingro Tunnel, which is the highway tunnel over the railway, Ingro is too weak. So it had to come in over the moors. Yeah. And the bridge came that way as well. They both came under police escorts from Hartshead Moor. I can't remember the name of the roads, but basically come off the M606 and go onto the Bradford Ring Road and then link up to a place called Queensbury. And then through Denham. We have to remove some benches in Denham to get the bridge through in advance.
With the old bridge, or like more widely with the bridges along your route, do you have them sort of, was it driven by like a numerical assessment? So basically capacity, or was it just condition?
It was condition led because so much of it was also the masonry underneath, which we wouldn't have really got an assessment of as such.
Yeah.
And it's also based on the information we had at the time, so we didn't have a comprehensive list of assessments on our structures. We are working with Cass Haywood and are progressively working our way up the branch now, and they're doing formal assessments on initially metallic bridges. We've got all but one done now. So no, it was condition led, really. It was condition and rate of deterioration led, I'd say, particularly within that condition. No. Shockingly, that wasn't quite what I had time to do. But
Burning the coal in the steam
we had to justify sustainability for the community ownership fund bid, which I can't remember how I sold it. Sustainability sold it on the flood.
Yeah.
Long term, I didn't say it's going to solve it. What I said is this is going to improve it, and there is future plans to improve it more. Use of local suppliers and materials. So basically, anything that the subcontractor didn't bring was sourced within about 4 miles of the site, which is, well, obviously not sourced, but in terms of the businesses that were used for its products. Sold about that. And also Bradford Council provided a lot of key information. So the railway puts something like £20 million a year GDP into the west side of Bradford, which it's not a particularly wealthy part of the world. So £20 million GDP is quite a lot of money from a business with a turnover of circa 3 to 4 million. I think that's what our turnover is. I don't actually know what our turnover is. I'm involved in that. But yeah, it was more about sustainability in terms of economic and stuff like that, rather than
It's not
carbon.
difficult to imagine that the contribution of the organisation to the local economy is estimable.
Okay, thanks very much for that. I don't have any questions chat from the teams, so I would like to ask Martin Sosha, who is the principal engineer for civil and structures at Nexus, to give a vote of thanks.
Thank you very much. It was really good. I'm really glad I came over to listen. Thank you for showing us the complex and challenging bridge replacement. I think it's got everything that you could have in terms of multidisciplinary aspects, any aspect, any discipline is you think to manage to deliver that. It's really good. Thank you for joining the presentation. And yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks very much for that, Martin. Last but not least, our next meeting, the December meeting, which again will be hybrid, will be held in this room. And Neil Blackburn, Programme Delivery Director from ACOM, is going to come and talk to us about the Northumberland Line project, project challenges and solutions. And that will be on the first Tuesday in December. So at this point, I'll close the meeting. Thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it. Thanks very much, Jim.
Thank you.